Awesome. Hey, so welcome everybody. Thank you guys so much for being here, and welcome back to this class, this program. So we're continuing on with this sequence of meditations that are structured based on the Search Inside Yourself program that I'd attended a couple months ago. And this section is on the topic of self-management. And so that's what I introduced on Saturday. And I'll go a little bit deeper into that. But the general concept here is learning how to manage ourself. And that's, it's interesting because normally a manager position is a little bit higher up in an organization, right? You start as an individual contributor, and you become a manager, and you go up through the ranks. And so manager takes a very different skill set, and learning to manage yourself takes a very different skill set as well. Basically learning what are the internal resources we have active in our own mind, our emotions, our feelings, what's going on, and especially our actions, and then learning how to have our actions be guided by wise reactions, wise responses, as opposed to impulsive responses. So what we can do is to take a few minutes just to settle in, as usual, begin to clear a little bit of space from the busyness of our day, and begin to settle our mind so that we can listen a bit more readily and to internalize this a bit more deeply. So as usual with our preliminary meditation, we can just find a comfortable position. Really, when in our daily life, this can be any position that's comfortable. We can meditate while we're walking, even while we're working, and so forth. The point is feeling comfortable, our body feeling relaxed, balanced. We can take a deep breath in and out. And then with a second breath in and out, we can just allow ourselves to relax and just invite ourselves to relax. Sometimes just inviting ourselves to relax makes a big difference. And we can ask ourselves, what's important right now? What's important now? We can become aware of the feelings inside our body, just becoming aware of the space around us, the temperature of the air, the feeling of the seat that we're sitting on. And we can ask ourselves, is there anything inside my body that's asking me to pay attention to it now? What inside my body is asking for my attention? Maybe it's just our breathing. Maybe we have some pain or some good feeling. And just become aware. And then we could just ask ourselves, are we feeling even a little bit different than we were at the start of this session? Is there any small change? And we can set an intention for this time, set a goal saying, how do we want the direction of our life to be influenced by this brief time together here? And then we can open our eyes from our meditation. There is there's a saying that again in the normal business management kind of world, there's a saying, you can't manage what you can't measure, or also measure what matters, and so forth. So just extending that to the personal domain, we can't manage ourselves if we can't measure or can't assess ourselves, what's going on. And so our awareness of what's going on inside of ourselves is actually a basic foundation for us to be able to manage ourselves. And when we're talking about managing ourselves, we're, again, to take the business analogy, management is the allocation of scarce resources. And you may not think of yourself as a manager, but we are definitely dealing with scarce resources, in particular our time and our energy and our life, right? What decisions we make, time and energy are the main ones. Where and our attention, where do we direct our attention? Where do we direct our time? To manage our own self wisely, we need to become aware of the different things that are happening inside of us. And so that's why mindfulness is a foundation for self-management. Just becoming aware of our own emotional state and becoming aware of our body and what our body is telling us, like just noticing those signs. It is amazing how much our body can tell us about what's actually happening. Even when we think that we're hiding something from the people around us are actually also very, very good at telling what our emotional state is. And so my wife yesterday was saying, reminding me again how utterly transparent I am with my emotional state, and how, if I'm making any, like I'm obviously making some effort to conceal, and that itself is completely transparent. My efforts to conceal my own feelings are completely transparent. Like, we're actually very good at reading the emotions of others. Did the person walk into the room? Are they a little bit tense? Are they friendly? Are they relaxed? Are they preoccupied? Are they anxious? We can read the emotions of others unusually well. How would that be possible if there wasn't something in the body itself that was conveying those emotions? So we convey emotions through our facial expressions, through the way we stand, through the way we move, indirectly. So what that's indicating is that our emotional state, if other people can read our emotional state, it must be through our body, right? Through seeing how we are. So that's another indication that we're internalizing our emotional state in our body. And there's places you can feel. If you remember, there was a diagram I shared some time back about where people feel different emotions throughout their body. So we want to become aware of all that's going on inside of us so that we can learn to manage it better, and in particular shift this reflexive, reactive tendency towards a more intentional and responsive behavior. So probably encountered this difference between reacting and responding. So when we react, it's an instinctive thing. Something happens and then we just immediately react, not always wisely. Whereas we use the term respond to indicate when we pause and are able to digest, internalize what's gone on, and then make an intentional decision about how we want to act or respond in that situation. So our goal is to move from reacting to responding, and that is kind of the essence of self-management. I'll share a slide very briefly, and then I'll come back and tell a story here. So this slide is a concept that was introduced in this Search Inside Yourself program, a terrible acronym, SBNRR. I think the fact that it's so awkward as an acronym should help you to remember it, right? So just, what was that really awkward acronym again? SBNRR, stop, breathe, notice, reflect, and respond. So stop, breathe, notice, reflect, and respond. This is a pattern that we can use anytime we notice our emotions beginning to get triggered. First thing to do is we stop. But fortunately, it doesn't end there. We need to breathe, right? And one of the interesting things about breathing, it shifts that energy that we hold in our body, because we can tend to stop and then freeze physically. When we breathe, it begins to sort of relax whatever tension we're holding, and then just notice what's actually going on inside you. Reflect on where that's coming from, why are you having that feeling, and then once you've reflected, understood what's going on, then you can respond. And in this way, have a much more intentional way of responding compared to how you might have otherwise reacted. I found myself turning that acronym over in my head just last night, and I had a great interaction with my wife that I thought was what you'd call a teachable moment. So I found myself using that very acronym and looking at managing my own responses. Last week on Saturday, I'd said that I'd mentioned this quote that when we're by ourselves, watch our mind. When we're with others, watch our speech. Most of us are, restrained. We're not. Most of us in a situation where we're going to lash out physically at others and so forth. So we've restrained our body, but our speech, we can easily weaponize our speech or lie and so forth. So our speech is that's the danger zone when we're interacting with others. Just a few days ago, my wife asked me what I would think about adopting another dog. And we pride ourselves on being minimalists. But the thing about being minimalists is that even minimalists accumulate stuff over time. The only way to really truly remain a minimalist is to not live in one place or have to carry all your belongings with you when you go. That's like every time you move, you decide, at least every time I move, I decide I hate stuff. I don't want any more stuff. I want less stuff. Moving, it creates the pain that you need to maintain a minimalist lifestyle. So we have one dog right now, small, incredibly low maintenance. We sort of pride ourselves on our simple life. But she said, I was thinking about adopting a dog, and then she showed me some pictures and so forth. So I'm like, okay, right. And I was very careful not to encourage her, not to discourage her. Just wanted to see how this thing played out. Don't want to be negative, but don't want to, egg her on either. I'm just going to see how this plays out. But over a few days, it was a pretty strong, pretty persistent wish. And so eventually, she identifies the dog and thinks through it and asks me repeatedly, are you sure you're okay with this? Are you sure you're okay? Are you sure you're okay? Gave me every opportunity to say no. And of course, I'm like, we have the time, the money, the energy, and so forth. We could look after another dog. It's not a problem. So I'm like, it's your call, of course. I'm happy to support. No problem. I'm doing all the right things, right? I'm a very supportive person. Anyway, so we go on the other day and actually pick up the dog on Saturday or Sunday. We pick up the dog, and the dog is in a real genuine rescue. 3 legs and big scar and half shaved and scruffy and just recovering from this surgery where it lost a leg. And so if you look at like pictures of, it was clearly a rescue. It was a pretty sad state. Needed somebody to look after it, and so of course, great opportunity. We bring the dog home, and then over a couple of days, though, I just noticed myself a little bit, being a little bit on edge. And then last night I was, I'd spent a lot of the day just sort of sitting and trying to work, but I noticed I couldn't actually work very well. So I was trying to do something, but I couldn't really work very well. And so I was feeling a bit frustrated about myself that I had a project set out, but I couldn't actually carry it through. So I was feeling frustrated with myself. And then she went out and then came back. And then she's, offering me a piece of fruit. And I just said, I'm a little bit edgy. And just calling it out, like, because we know enough about ourselves to know that, when we're edgy, just give some space, right? So and then I found my mind, wanting to, coming up with like trying to concoct some explanation for how she was complicating our life or something like that. And, and it was bubbling up as like hurtful speech. It was going to bubble up as some kind of hurtful speech, like saying something like, because the thing is, like I said on Saturday, you can take any person and just look at them and you can figure out a way to weaponize your words. But of course, if it's someone that you live with and know very well, then you're even more powerful, right? At choosing something that's going to stop them in their tracks. I like that way of describing it, right? Words that would stop someone in their tracks, hurtful speech. And I thought, okay, stop. What are you doing? Stop, breathe. Notice, right? I'm just edgy. Like, what is that? I'm just edgy. There's some tension in my body, and I could feel it right in my chest. I could feel some like a little bit of heat, a little bit of burning, and then reflect. And then she asked just openly, why are you edgy? And I just took a long time to think, well, I'm mostly edgy at that time because I was feeling ineffective. I was feeling powerless because I set out these intentions for myself, but then I couldn't carry them through. But I was trying to be very, very careful not to spin it as like blaming her for a situation, because that's a natural thing for the mind to do. We always want to blame somebody else for our situation, for how heavy something is. Because you did this, I'm like, we do it with our coworkers or our boss or friends, or any time there's some tension, our mind always goes towards blame. Why is it somebody else's fault that we're not feeling very well right now? Of course, if somebody else actually had the power to make you feel not very well or very well, that's an incredible amount of power. So we're projecting that other people have this power. You have the power to make me tense. You have the power to make me feel insecure. Other people don't have that power. It's our reactions that give other people that power. But then I gradually sort of inched into saying, I'm a little bit surprised we made this decision to get the dog, and I'm just still adjusting, right? Because the family has grown from 3 to 4. So, it's a minor thing, right? And the difficulty that brought for us is negligible compared to the difficulties most anybody else in the world is experiencing. So no problem. But then it basically opened up as the opportunity for us to both acknowledge that we were both a little bit surprised that this unfolded, that she acknowledged to me, she said, I don't quite know where that came from either, but I had this wish arise. It was strong. And then I saw this particular dog. I decided I really wanted to adopt it. But it's like, she also didn't fully know where the wish had arisen from. But it gave us a chance as a conversation to just in the conversation to reflect on the fact that, being married has been very helpful, because we've made a commitment and we're like, okay, it doesn't matter. Now we're family. And it's like being born into a family. Your siblings, your parents have many, many disadvantages and faults, right? But like, you're stuck with them, right? You yourself have many, many faults and embarrassing characteristics, right? But we're stuck with ourselves. So just like we wouldn't have chosen every aspect of ourselves, and we really would kind of love for ourselves to be different. So we may feel the same about our partner. We would love them to be a bit different or a lot different, but hey, they're not, we're not. And this is just who we are, and we're stuck. And being stuck is normal. We're all stuck. That's just normal. That's the way it is. That's the way life is. But when you're in a marriage, if you hold that commitment, then you're stuck together, right? It's like a potato sack race, or the three-legged race, where everybody's like, you have to move through life with. But being stuck together forces you to change your mind instead of changing the external circumstances. So it's what you call a constraint that opens up some new creative possibilities. So it's a constraint, but it opens up new opportunities, and it forces you to change your mind. And that's true with any situation that you're stuck in. And boy, we're stuck in a lot of situations, right? Our jobs, we're always stuck in some way in our jobs, or lack of a job, or a place, or, there's 1,000 situations we're stuck in. But learning acceptance is the first step. And we were reflecting on how we both have changed and continue to change day by day, moment by moment. And she's a very wise person. She was saying, she didn't entirely know, that I have stories about her. We tell stories about ourselves. As I said before, many times, we're storytelling primates. And the main story we tell is we tell the story about ourselves, but we also tell stories about the other person. But these stories, they're just stories, right? She's like this, she used to be like this, but they're all just stories. And the reality, when we look at it, is that we're both just changing moment by moment. And we're both, have a collection of wishes and intentions and feelings and, our bodies and so forth, but they're all just changing moment by moment, and we're watching them unfold, and neither of us really know where this is going. Neither of us know what we're turning into, or what we're turning into together. That the reality is that although we can tell ourselves stories about the future, we can tell ourselves stories about the past, about ourselves, about other people, and so forth. When you look at the actual data, we're a lot more complicated than our own stories about ourselves. The people around us are more complicated than our stories about them. And everything is unfolding together. So she and I are unfolding together. Us and the dogs are unfolding together. We're discovering this new world. We don't know what's going to happen, but what we can do is, in whatever situation we find ourselves in, root in that with acceptance, and just think, okay, in this situation, what can we learn from this? How can we learn from this situation? How can we learn from this poor dog hopping along? How can we learn from the the challenges of just discussing together? There's a teacher that we both like. His name is Ajahn Sushito, and he was giving an analogy. He said that we all tend to feel like we're in control of our life and our world, or we want to feel like we're in control of our life or our world. But we're like a person on the bridge of a ship with this captain's wheel, right? And then we're like turning the ship, and we're going to go left, we're going to go right, we're going to, make all these controls, and we're trying to play the role of the captain, and captain the ship of ourself and the ship of our life. And we put so much energy into that, so much drama, but we don't realize that the wheel is actually not connected to the rudder. It's like one of these toy things where you give a child like the wheel so they can play with the wheel, but they're not actually controlling the ship. For the most part, we're not controlling the ship, right? we're not actually very well in control of even the minds that are arising in ourselves. What's going on around us, the circumstances, and so forth. And we tend to emphasize control and action and de-emphasize just observation and learning and just noticing what's going on inside of ourselves. And she was reflecting, for example, that there is a bit of a maternal instinct that she's got towards the dog that's a bit different from my instinct. And she didn't really plan that, but it's something in part to do with being in a woman's body. And for me, I have these characteristically male, tendencies, distracted by pretty girls and so forth. I don't really want to be like that. I don't intend to be like that, but it's just something a little bit instinctive, right? And something about, being born as a human with these human bodies and certain characteristics that actually is fascinating if you just observe. Like if you just try to notice what's actually going on and don't give yourself such a hard time about it, but just like be open to it and learn from it and say, wow, this tendency is coming up for me again and again and again, or this tendency for, whatever it is, anxiety or hurtful speech, or, our confidence ebbs and flows and so forth. And so this gets into another topic that was brought up in that, which is the topic of self-compassion. So this is a topic that has been researched more in recent years. This woman, Dr. Neff, she's a professor of educational psychology, but she's written a number of books on self-compassion. Self-compassion is a mind of compassion that's turned inwards. So if a friend came to you and said, oh, I'm going through this situation in my life, what would you advise me? So for example, if I came to you with that situation, my wife had decided to get a dog, and I'm having some second thoughts, but of course I would never want to abandon the dog, and I'm just feeling a little bit tense. Could you be kind to me? Could you listen? Could you give advice? Of course you could, right? Because you're a very nice person. you're very open-minded. We could all summon up advice for a friend. So can we do that for ourselves, right? So can we have compassion for ourselves? Can we notice what's going on inside of ourselves and say, and respond to ourselves as if we're speaking to ourselves like a friend, like a friend. And this is something where journaling could be useful, where you just write. If you were to write a letter to yourself, think about a difficult situation that you're facing, and then write a letter to yourself, giving yourself advice. What would you write? And you might find that you've got very compassionate advice for yourself. So the three characteristics of self-compassion are self-kindness versus self-judgment. So this means being kind to yourself as opposed to judging yourself, as it's fairly obvious, I think, but having this mindset of kindness as opposed to having a strong, strict judgment of ourselves. But then a sense of common humanity versus isolation. And that's very interesting. It's so powerful. I think I said in some previous discussion I had with Abhishek that there's nothing that unites us more than loneliness. That every person is united by this common human experience of loneliness, and everything in our life, it's part of a common human experience. This tendency towards anger, right? This tendency towards hurtful speech, or this tendency towards, this what a male, mind does, what a female mind does. All these kinds of things. They're very, very common elements to all of us. And so it's very powerful, self-compassion, just sort of seeing that we're all in similar challenges. And then mindfulness versus over-identification. So mindfulness just means being aware of what's going on. Over-identification is thinking this is me. But it's just like the analogy of this person on the bridge of a ship, with a wheel, and we're not actually fully in control, not identifying, thinking, oh, I should be like this, or, I'm I'm failing, or I'm suffering, or I'm struggling, but just being mindful of it and having some distance between yourself and those characteristics that you're observing, the sufferings, challenges you're observing. So in subsequent research on this topic, they found that people who practice this, emphasize or train in some self-compassion, even for a short period of time, found these benefits, among others: an improved growth mindset, a belief that they could change, but also increased motivation to change, and increased motivation to grow and learn from others, and increased motivation to improve these whatever weaknesses we might have. So these powerful benefits that come from just having this attitude, this mindset. So the phrase would be, may I be happy, or may I be free from suffering. Just like you'd say, may others be happy, may others be free from suffering, may I be happy, may I be free from suffering. This is a mindset or attitude of self-compassion. Okay. Any questions on this so far before we go into some meditation? You want to see pictures of my dog? All right, well, I'll send them later. No. Okay. All right. So self-compassion. What we can do in this meditation is take a bit of time, again, just we'll take another one of these scenario-based meditations and think about a situation where we felt emotionally challenged and stretched, like pushed to the edge, like we were under a lot of stress, and our emotions are sort of bubbling up a little bit. Nothing that's going to be too traumatic for us, but just recalling a situation in which we were, our emotional response was very, very strong. And then what we can do is to do both of these exercises. Just kind of stop, recall the situation, but then stop, breathe, notice, reflect, but reflect with self-compassion. Reflect on what's actually going on inside of ourselves. Okay. So yeah, for this meditation, again, we can return to a comfortable position. If it's helpful to stretch our body a bit, to settle in. Again, just taking a deep breath in and out. And we can think of a challenging situation in our life. Perhaps it's something fairly alive for us, something fairly recent, or some challenge that has gives us an emotional response, a worry, a fear, anger, something. We can try to recall the situation. And we may be tempted to say or do something under the influence of this emotion. Maybe some temptation to lash out because of our emotional reaction, or to flee from a situation. Instead of reacting, we can think, we can stop and just breathe. And then notice, are we feeling this somewhere in our body? Is there somewhere in our body that we feel these reactions? And then we can reflect, but reflect with self-compassion. So instead of self-judgment, instead of judging ourselves for our reaction, we bring an attitude of self-kindness. And we think, how is our situation the same or similar to that experienced by other people? How is this situation just a reflection of our common humanity? And can we be aware of our experience with mindfulness instead of identifying with it? Just noticing that our own reaction, the situation, is just a bubbling up from inside our being, our mind, our body. And then we can ask ourselves, with all of this awareness of our inner state, how do we want to respond in this situation? What is the appropriate response? Not driven by emotion, reactive, but driven by our wisdom. And we can reflect in the short time that we've been together here. Already the direction of our life has changed, even just slightly, even just a little bit. So through our efforts here, changing our mind, becoming more aware, just imagine, how could this unfold in beneficial ways for ourselves and others? How could our life move in a more beneficial direction as a result of this time? And then we can open our eyes and arise from our meditation.